How's it going, guys? Casey here with the Coyote Works channel. We are off the pavement and headed up out of the Paulina Valley up into the Ochoco Mountains. Got a couple of pieces of local history that I'm trying to track down on this trip. One is a mill site up here in the Ochocos that a local told me about, whose grandfather, I believe, worked on the mill site. So this route I'm following now is actually a fairly well-maintained road right now, and it's going to take me all the way from the river bottom up into the Ochoco National Forest. And originally what a lot of these routes were that go from the valleys up into the Ochoco National Forest is they were routes that the cattlemen and the sheepmen used to move their cows from the lower pastures that they used in the wintertime down in the valleys up into the upper pastures up in the Ochoco Mountains where they would graze in the summers. It's just a gorgeous day out here today. Right now the temperature, well, it's about 51 degrees up here, but man, it is dry. We haven't had a drop of rain since September. We got a little bit of rain in September and just haven't had anything since then. So we're going to run right up this little side road here, and hopefully this will be a pretty quick side trip, but we're just going to see if we can't find any sign of that old mill site up here. If we can't find any sign of it within a short period of kind of kicking around there, then we're just going to get back in the Jeep and head on into some country where we're going to make our camp at. So we should be getting close to that old mill site. And I think what I'm walking on here is an old road, but so far I haven't seen any sign. So what I'm looking for, in addition to old stumps, old logs, old timber, is maybe an old can, old cable, a timber with any kind of a hardware in it, like a bolt. Right there, I just kicked up a piece of stovepipe out of the ground. That's a good sign. Couple more pieces of metal in here. Mother lode. Check this out, guys. Look right out in front of us. Old can dump. All right. There's some twisted up corrugated metal. I'm guessing that was from one of the buildings. I think just up there where that can dump was, on the top of that little knoll, right there, I think is where the cook shack was. And then I don't know what this is. Look at this, guys. That was one of the building sites right there. There's some old concrete piers from something. All right, I think right here where I'm standing, I've got these concrete piers all around me, thinking this was the actual site of the sawmill here. That's pretty interesting. So I believe this was called the Triangle Sawmill, and when I get back I'll have to do some more research and see if I can find out some more information about what years it operated from. But this is the crowning jewel, guys. This is the moment that I live for, is hearing that story, hearing about that piece of history, and then coming out here and actually finding it on the ground. There's no car door over there. I don't know if the camera's picking it up back behind me. So I'm guessing this was operational up into the 30s or the 40s. Wow, guys, that was a pretty awesome start to the trip. But I ended up spending several hours walking around that mill site. So now that gives me about 2 hours before dark. So I think my next priority has to be starting to look for a campsite. What I'd like to do is find a spot to camp sometime within the next hour or so. This is just beautiful country in here. I'm looking down off the breaks, down into the river canyon down there. Roads are pretty good in here. There hasn't been a lot of traffic. Even considering all the hunting seasons just happened, there's actually not that many tracks on this road. I'm in kind of a cool spot in here, but the timber's a little dense. I'd rather not be down in a bunch of this dense ponderosa pine just in case the winds do start coming up. I don't want to be under any potential blowdown, so I'm just going to find us a spot to camp, and I'll probably focus on that. So I'll hit you guys back when I find a camp spot. Alright guys, well this is going to have to do. I just did a quick little scout around here, and what was pretty cool is I saw a little buck coming up right down over the hillside over there, and because of the wind he couldn't smell me and he was walking right up towards me. Well, I didn't have my camera or my phone, so I had to sneak back to the Jeep, grab my camera, and then I got back on him. But he's a pretty nice little buck, and I think he was suspicious that there was somebody around, but he never did run, and it was neat just to see him kind of work his way from one side of where I'm camped, across this little ridge over here, and right over to the other side. So that was a pretty cool omen, seeing that little buck pretty much as soon as I pulled into camp. So this isn't the best camp spot I've ever had in the world, but a couple of things it has going for it is it's right up in this little saddle here. So I got a level spot for the Jeep. I got a little open area here where I can build a little fire pit. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get a new piece of gear out that I'm going to show you guys. And I'm going to get my firewood supply in, and then I'm going to grab my shovel and start improving a little fire pit. I always like to put my fire pit a little ways away from my Jeep so that smoke from the fire isn't blowing into my Jeep and into my rooftop tent. I'm going to put my fire pit about right here, so I'm going to clear some of this wood out of the way. I don't have any trees really close overhead, so this should be a good little spot right here. Alright, I got a nice little area cleared. I want to pull all the duff back and give myself a nice dirt bare spot, bigger than the fire that I want. About the top 2 inches out here are just pine needles and partially decomposing pine needles, so I don't want to take any chance of a fire spreading. It's not fire season, however, the woods are still pretty dry, so I want to take a little bit more precautions than I typically would in the wintertime for this one. Alright, I want to build a little fire reflective wall. So here's a pro tip for gathering rocks for your fire reflective wall. If you're trying to know how much rocks you need, the trick is your pile of rocks that you gather should be roughly as big as you want your fire reflective wall to be. So imagine the finished size of your fire reflective wall, look at your pile of rocks, and ask yourself, is the pile of rocks that I've gathered big enough to build that reflective wall that I'm picturing in my mind? Mine's clearly not, so I gotta go get some more rocks. Yeah, gathering rocks for your fire pit is kind of like gathering firewood for the night. Gather as much as you think you need, and then you're pretty safe if you multiply that by 3 and get 3 times that many. So one thing I really enjoy when I have the time is kind of the ritual of setting up camp. You guys know that I like to go out, take my backpack, go out and do some bushcraft type camping and stuff too from time to time. And recently I've gotten more into the exploring and being able to cover more distance, so I've been doing more camping out of my rig. But I still like kind of blending the two. Camping out of my rig like Overland style, but taking the time to do things like build myself a nice fire pit, do some cooking over the fire. But I really enjoy that ritual of taking some of the things from the environment and using them to make my camp. All right, now for that new piece of gear I've been waiting to show you guys. So years ago I went away from taking a chainsaw with me when I'm out overlanding for a couple of reasons. One, because they're just so noisy. I always hate using them. I always feel like I like to let the wildlife be comfortable as close to my camp as possible and everything. But the big reason is when I went away from pickup trucks and I started running the SUVs like the Nissan Xterra, the Nissan Armada, the Jeeps, it seemed like every time I put a gas-powered chainsaw with gas and oil inside my vehicle, inevitably I ended up with gas fumes in the rig. So eventually I just stopped using the chainsaw altogether. But a few years ago these battery-powered chainsaws came out, and I started watching them. And it seems like they're finally getting to the point where the battery life on them, with the rapid recharge and everything, is good enough to be a viable tool out here. So My good buddy Travis at Par Lumber ordered one in for me, and this is its maiden voyage. So let's give this thing a try and see if it's gonna rock my world when it comes to firewood gathering. So this is the Makita, and Makita makes two models of battery operated chainsaws. This is the little bit higher end model. This one takes two of the rapid recharge 18-volt batteries, and let's see how this thing works. So power it on, and there we go. Cuts like butter. So obviously the big thing about these is going to be how long does the battery last. So that's kind of one of the things that I'm experimenting with here today. So this is pretty tough mountain mahogany here, and it's not having any problem eating right through it. I'm going to call this thing a success. I cut for about 20 minutes or so. I can't tell any drop in the battery, and I'm cutting this mahogany wood, really dense wood. The saw cuts it great. Now granted, it's got a brand new sharp chain on it and everything, but 20 minutes of cutting, because this mahogany burns so long, this will be plenty of wood for my wood supply tonight, and it'll make great coals for cooking over. Fire pit's all done. I had to pull my ready light out because it was getting dark on me pretty fast. So now I'll grab the rest of my gear, set up my little camp, set up my rooftop tent, and then I'll probably wait to build a fire until all that stuff is all done. Put my table together real quick. So my actual camp setup usually only takes me about 10 or 15 minutes, but like I said, I really enjoy the ritual of setting up a nice camp, and tonight, where I took the time to gather a nice pile of firewood, build a really nice fire pit. But as far as like my pre-made gear, you know, my table, my chairs, my rooftop tent, all of that stuff sets up in about 10 or 15 minutes. And that's one thing about kind of blending the old with the new, is it gives me the choice. I can spend the time on the things I want to spend time on, the things that I enjoy, like building stuff, building a nice fire pit, things like that. And then things that are more difficult and more time consuming to build, like a table and chairs, I already have with me. Rooftop tent set up. My bedding and everything's already up here. I just have to toss my bag in. I have an inflatable pillow in there, so I'll blow up that pillow, and that's pretty much all I have to do to get my bed ready. All right, guys, well, I'm making a one-pot meal tonight for dinner, so I'm going to get it started. Normally I kick back a little bit and enjoy the fire before I start dinner, but tonight I've got a one-pot meal, and I want to get it simmering because I need it to simmer for a while. So what do I got here? Well, what I'm going to make up is kind of a Creole-inspired red beans and rice, and it's really simple to make and really easy to prepare everything to bring out here, and it's an excellent meal that really sticks to your ribs and fills you up. So what I have here is I have some Blue Runner Creole-style creamed red beans, some Zatarain's dirty rice, I've got some andouille sausage, some chicken, and some cilantro. Other than that, I've just got a little bit of butter. So it's going to take us about 30 minutes or so to cook it, but then it's going to be absolutely amazing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start up my pan, and I'm going to add a little butter to it, and then I'm going to toss in the chicken and the andouille sausage and just brown it up a little bit. And this challenge squeeze butter is like one of the best inventions since sliced bread for camping. Get a good amount of butter in there because that's also going to be part of the flavor. Now I'm going to toss in my andouille sausage, give it a little stir. Now we'll add the chicken. just going to brown this stuff up a little bit. Alright, so that chicken and sausage is cooked up nice. So the next ingredient I'm going to add is just some water. I added about 2.5 cups of water or so. I'm just going to bring that to a simmer, and then I'll dump in the Zatarain's dirty rice, and I'll let that simmer all together for about 20-25 minutes or so. Alright, that water's boiling nicely. So we're going to add the rice and seasoning. Oh my God, that smells amazing. Alright, we'll let that simmer for about 20 minutes or so. Then I'll throw in the cilantro and the cream style red beans. Let that cook for just about 5 or 10 more minutes and we will be good to go. Alright, well, it's time for me to kick back. I've got 20 minutes until the next step of my cooking, so I'm going to enjoy a aloe vera. And this one is aloe and lemon and grapefruit. Alright, it's been about 20 minutes. Oh my God, this smells amazing. This Zatarain's dirty rice, the flavors that are in it are absolutely incredible. Like, you don't need to add anything. A box of Zatarain's dirty rice, add some meat to it, and that in itself is a great meal. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and toss the cilantro in. What I like about adding the fresh cilantro is it just gives it that clean kind of a taste. It's hard to explain, but you know how cilantro has that really fresh, clean taste, and especially with something like this that's kind of spicy and a little bit salty, like that cilantro just adds a nice little coolness to it. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and add the beans. And man, if you guys can find these Blue Runner Cream Creole style beans, these are the absolute best ones to use for this. And these are just going to add a creaminess and a little more of a protein base to it and just thicken it up a little bit. Look at that beautiful color. The red beans, the rice, the cilantro, nice chunks of andouille sausage. All right, guys, the moment I've been waiting for. Cheers, guys. And camp cooking just doesn't get much better than this. Coyote Works, dirty rice and red beans, Cajun style. That andouille sausage adds a little bit of a kick to it. And the chicken is nice and tender. It's a little bit like a soup, but thick enough that you can eat it on a plate. And the flavors are just incredible. Oh, guys, that was a fantastic dinner. So I'm just going to kick back and relax by the fire here for a little bit. I lost one of my camera batteries, so I'm down to 2 for my main camera, and one of them just died. So I'm going to plug it into my little Blackfire power station. While I'm sitting here by the fire, I'll just let that battery charge up there. Another pretty cool little piece of kit I got from that Blackfire is this clip light that goes on your hat. I've been using this the last couple of trips, and I'm a big fan of headlamps. I've always got a couple of headlamps on, but I've actually really been liking this because I'm always wearing a ball cap, and it's always a little bit tricky running a headlamp with a ball cap. Well, I think my coals are burned down low enough that they'll be all right for the night. My battery's charging, and I'm going to slip up in the rooftop tent and read a little bit.
Good morning, guys. Well, it's a little bit after 6 this morning, and I slept like a baby last night. It actually didn't get that cold. I don't even know if it got down much below freezing last night, so I was nice and toasty in my 20-degree Wiggy sleeping bag. This morning I'm just having a little coffee, go out there and build a little fire and enjoy the morning.
It's chilly out here this morning. I was just getting ready to build a fire, and there's still nice heat coming off of these coals. So that was about almost 9 hours ago that I went up in my rooftop tent, left the fire pit, and woke up, and there's still glowing coals here. So that mountain mahogany is just awesome wood. It makes a great fire, long-lasting coals, man.
It's a real treat when I find a camp spot that's in the middle of a bunch of that mountain mahogany. So this is what that mountain mahogany looks like. Now this one is actually a dead one, which would be a perfect one to saw up for firewood. Nice and dense wood, really heavy, thick wood, but they're usually fairly low, like somewhere around 12 feet tall or so, all twisted over, and it's not uncommon even when they're alive for them to be kind of leaning over like this. Here's a live one right here that's still got the bark on it, and they tend to grow on kind of rocky slopes like this or in the saddles. So we got pine trees in the draws around us, and these mountain mahogany are growing up on this rocky slope. One thing about these mountain mahogany trees, there's no leaves on about the lower 6 feet or so of these trees. And the reason is because the deer and the elk love to browse on these. On this one, maybe you can see how the canopy of the tree is high and all these lower branches are completely devoid of any leaves. Just gathering up a few pine needles to get the fire started with. When I'm gathering pine needles, I just kind of lightly brush the very top layer of them off, and usually right underneath the base of the trees is where they'll be nice and dry. Looks like we got flame. A couple more minutes, I'll have a nice campfire. All right, time for my second cup of coffee. Got my cup, another pretty cool Coyote Works cup from Jeff over at 2319 Designs. Give him a follow on Instagram. Look up 2319 Designs. And then I've got my hydro flask full of coffee that I made at home. And as you guys know, I like iced coffee. So I've got ice cubes in my coffee cup and iced coffee in that. All right, life is good. Looks like my batteries are charging, phone's charging, flashlight's charged up. All right, well, I got some coffee in me. So now I'm gonna go ahead and get geared up. And probably the next thing I'll do is make some breakfast. All right, I'm gonna have my traditional easy camp breakfast. Some, I got the new Coyote Works knife. Everybody's calling it the Coyote Pup, but to me it's just the Coyote Works Survival Knife 2.0 from Chad over at CK Knife and Tool. You guys can find him on Instagram or on YouTube, CK Knife and Tool. But I'll show you guys a little bit more about this knife, but I'm pretty stoked. So this was the second knife in my series of Coyote Works knives. The first one you guys have seen is the big, beefy survival knife, and then this one is a little smaller camp knife. So I'm gonna have some oatmeal. So I've got a cup of Red Hill instant oatmeal. I'll put in some mango slices. I'll add a little bit of water to constitute it, and then I'll let it sit for a little bit, and then I'm going to add some heavy whipping cream to it. I've got a pan of sausages right there, so I'm going to cook up some sausages too. Now the pro tip, set my oatmeal down in that boiling water, put the lid back on it. Now I'll start cooking my sausages. All right, this is perfect. These are those Zenner's pork breakfast sausages. Man, these things are good sausages. And that oatmeal with the heavy cream in it and the mangoes is perfect. So a couple more pieces of gear I wanted to play around with a little bit on this trip. And one of the huge ones is the Coyote Works 2.0 knife. So while 1.0 was meant to be kind of a beefy jack-of-all-trades survival knife, this one's meant to be a little bit more of a camp, bushcraft, skinning knife. Something that's a little more suited for small tasks. Another piece of gear that I have is my buddy Austin over at Benchmade sent me one of their new fire steels.
And this is actually a pretty cool little fire steel. The handle is a watertight container that you can put some tinder in. So we're going to try out this fire steel from Benchmade. We're going to play around a little bit with the Coyote Works 2.0 survival knife. So what I have here is I've got this old blowdown ponderosa pine, and right here I've got some pitch wood. So how you can recognize it is it usually will have kind of a reddish or an orangish color. So what I'm going to do is harvest a little bit of this pitch wood, and then we're going to see if we can't use the Benchmade fire steel to get a fire going with it. Alright, I found a nice little slab of this pitch wood right here. Oh yeah, perfect. So the first thing we're going to do is just make some really fine shavings out of it. So another technique that I use to get really fine shavings is I'll use the spine of the knife. So one of my design criteria for the Coyote Works knives is they have to have a sharp enough spine, number one, to strike a fire steel, and number two, to be able to shave like this. Because this is where you'll get your really fine shavings that are going to take a spark really well. Alright, so let's see how the Benchmade fire steel throws a spark. Oh, good sparks. Alright, so let's see if we can get our little fire started. Oh, look at that. One strike, and it's good to go. So if you can find some of this fat wood, that's far and above the easiest way to get a fire started out here. Otherwise, you can use juniper bark as a tinder or sagebrush bark as a tinder. But the cool thing about this pitch wood is, like, those will ignite even when it's wet outside. So the Coyote Works Knife 2.0 and the Benchmade Fire Steel are both a win in my book. I'll do a more in-detail review on the Coyote Works 2.0 knife after I've had a chance to use it a little bit more. I literally just got this one. Chad from CK Knife and Tool brought this one down to me at the Coyote Works group Overland trip. So this is the first time that I've really been able to use it out in the field. So I'm going to do a little bit more sawing this morning with this Makita battery powered chainsaw because I used it for about 20, maybe 25 minutes last night, got my wood supply, and I have plenty left, and the battery indicator on this still says that the battery's fully charged. So I'm kind of curious to see what the battery life is on this, so I'm going to run it a little bit more today, see if I can wear this battery out, number one, and number two, I might grab a little bit of extra wood so I can take to my next campsite. Alright, well, it's official. This thing's a beast for a battery-powered chainsaw, so I'm still on that first set of batteries. Right now, the battery indicator tells me that I'm only 1 bar down. There's 3 little LED lights for each battery, and it's showing that I'm 1 down. So, I don't know, guys, 35 minutes worth of cutting time so far, and I'm cutting smaller stuff, but this mahogany, and I cut up a dry juniper tree too. And generally speaking, that's fairly tough wood, and this thing's just not even breaking a sweat cutting through it. So this will be another nice little tool to have in the toolkit for my wintertime camping. It definitely make gathering firewood a lot simpler when I roll into my winter camp late at night after dark. So one thing dynamic that happens a lot is I'm out traveling, doing some exploring, and I pass places where there's good wood supplies, but by the time I get to where I'm going to end up camping, there's not a good wood supply around my camp. And you guys have seen some of my other videos where I'm out in the sagebrush country. So one thing that I'm adding into my system is a couple of these firewood bags, so that when I come across a place where there's some good wood, I can gather some, have something to put it inside, so I can put a little wood supply inside my Jeep. Well, I told you guys I was going to get out of camp early, and then I promptly didn't. I got distracted hiking around, playing around with my new Coyote Works Knife 2.0 from Chad up at CK Knife and Tool, and those are available. Chad's taken orders for the Coyote Works Survival Knife or Coyote Works Knife 1.0, and the Coyote Works Camp Bushcraft Knife, which is Coyote Works 2.0. I'm going to get my rooftop tent stowed away because I see some clouds over there. I don't know if they'll amount to anything, but start packing up my camp, get my rooftop tent stowed, and we'll roll on down the trail. So I'm really liking this new Adventure Series tent with the gas strut system in it. To stow away the tent, all I do is I just pull this strap down. And there's a little knob right up inside here that I latch the strap in, and then it's good to go. So even though it's the middle of November, it's dry enough out here that I don't really want to take any chances with my fire. So I'm just going to dump a little water on it. A couple of pieces of gear that I always get questions about. This table is from Free Spirit Recreation. Metal top. I can set hot pans on it. I don't have to worry about melting it. It folds in half so it stows away nice and easy. They also have a chair set with it. I usually use those chairs in the wintertime because they're insulated. In the summertime, I use the front runner chair that I got from Overland. It's not, again, nice and compact. There's the packed size of the chair. I like things that pack into squares or rectangles. So things like the Blackfire portable power station, this front runner chair, the Free Spirit table, all those are things that are nice sizes dimensionally when they're stowed to be able to pack in the vehicle. Looks like my last cycle of battery is charged. Another piece of gear every single video I get questions about is the Ready Light from Free Spirit. So this is an overhead camp light. It puts out lots of light around camp. Has these detachable lights, 4 of them, that I generally use inside my rooftop tent. And on the back of it is this solar panel. So not only is it self-charging, but it's also a backup power bank that you can charge any kind of USB accessories from. Normally when I'm using it, just I can use it all night and then set it out in the sun in the morning, and that's enough to charge it back up so that it just runs perpetually. It's been ultra reliable. This particular one right here, this actual light, I've been running for 3 years now, and it has sat out in the snow, in the frost, in the freezing weather, in the rain, and I've just never had an issue with it. So there's that table's packed size. Nice little compact rectangle. A few minutes later, I was back in my Jeep and on the trail, making the journey back home, taking it nice and slow, and looking forward to all the country I would get to explore along the way. One thing I almost always do is I plan my trips in a loop. That way, even the journey home gives me the opportunity to see some new country. Virtually every single trip I make into the backcountry ends up being unique, and most of them don't go exactly the way as I originally planned them. This trip was no exception. But while I didn't find a couple of the other historic sites I was looking for, I did end up really enjoying spending some extra time around camp. It's something that I rarely ever do. Usually my main focus is on covering miles, exploring, and finding some new sites. But this time, I actually got to spend some time around camp, wringing out some new pieces of gear, working with the Coyote Works survival knife, and just spending some time in more of the campcraft experience. I hope you all enjoyed joining me for this trip, and I'll look forward to seeing you again on the next one. But until then, my friends, Coyote Works, out.